A married Pennsylvania State Police trooper was accused of abusing his authority when he forcibly arrested his ex-girlfriend, mistress, in August of 2023. 37-year-old Ronald Keith Davis is married and was living with his family in Dauphin County, while his mistress, 37-year-old Michelle Pafanov, was living at a trailer he owned. After a 4-month romance, their relationship disintegrated. Out of spite, Davis obtained a petition to have her involuntarily committed to a mental institution. On August 21st, he was caught on video, arresting her after chasing her down. Davis allegedly sat on Pafanov, lay on her, and grabbed her by the legs throughout. In the aftermath, the woman was taken to the hospital, and doctors determined that she wasn't mentally unstable at all. On September the 21st of 2023, Davis was arrested. He was facing several charges, including felony strangulation, unlawful restraint, false imprisonment, simple assault, recklessly endangering another person, and official oppression. Prosecutors said that Davis was held in Dauphin County Prison without bail. Things are probably not looking good for his 9-year career with the force. Number 10. Mauricio Garces. 34-year-old New Jersey man Mauricio Garces was found asleep inside his vehicle by Secaucus police shortly after 3 a.m. on July the 2nd of 2023. His car was stopped in the left-hand turn traffic lane at the intersection of Secaucus Road and County Avenue. Garces was apparently unaware that he'd fallen asleep behind the wheel. When he was asked if he knew where he was, he responded, "By Hoboken," which was a few miles away from Secaucus. Apparently, he was also having trouble answering simple questions, slurring his words, and eventually struggling with a field sobriety test. He also admitted to having had a couple of drinks and said that he worked for the Union City Police Department. The Secaucus police officer then told him that he might be looking for some kind of preference and asked him why he would even bring that up without being asked. Ultimately, Garces was arrested and charged with driving while under the influence and reckless driving. Records indicated that this was his second DWI arrest. Subsequent information indicated that he pleaded not guilty to charges on August the 1st. Number 9. Kenneth Booth Jr. In Orange Beach, Alabama, 28-year-old Deputy Kenneth Booth Jr. from the Cullman County Sheriff's Office allegedly killed a colleague whom he was dating. The incident took place during their beach getaway at the Seaside Beach and Racket Club. According to authorities, Booth killed 23-year-old shift supervisor Lexi White on September the 7th of 2023 during an argument that stemmed from unknown reasons. The argument reportedly escalated to the point where Booth eventually pulled out a weapon and shot White. Officials said that later Booth was also found dead. Sheriff Matt Gentry said that everyone in his department was devastated by the shocking incident. Number 8. Jonathan Meerhoff. A video of an off-duty officer from the Chicago Police Department in Illinois berating law enforcement during a traffic stop went viral in 2021. Jonathan Meerhoff was pulled over in July of 2021. CPD body camera footage revealed that Meerhoff was belligerent, yelling profanities throughout the duration of the traffic stop. It was unclear why he was pulled over. Records indicated that he wasn't arrested that night. However, on November the 27th of the subsequent year, he was arrested. A Harrison District Tactical Unit saw Meerhoff's Acura MDX run 2 red lights in the 400 and 500 blocks of South Costner in Chicago at around 8 p.m. on the aforementioned date. When they tried to conduct a traffic stop, the vehicle allegedly sped off. Law enforcement gave chase and eventually caught Meerhoff when he abruptly stopped in the middle of traffic near Independence Boulevard. Meerhoff informed them that he was a police officer. According to the police report, a supervisor let him drive to the Harrison District Station, where he was arrested. He was charged with misdemeanor fleeing and eluding and misdemeanor reckless conduct. Additionally, he was given 4 traffic citations. Meerhoff's vehicle was impounded and his off-duty weapon was seized. In the aftermath, he was stripped of police powers pending an internal investigation. Number 7. Ana Alicia Perez. 2 Florida women were charged with battery for allegedly beating up a man they were both dating. After 34-year-old Ana Alicia Perez and 35-year-old Mila Zuluaga learned they were both in a relationship with the same man, they confronted him shortly before 1 a.m. on May the 26th of 2023. The furious pair showed up at Miller's Ale House in Palmetto Bay, where a verbal dispute between them and the man ensued. Fox News reported that the altercation quickly escalated into a public smackdown. Perez and Zuluaga reportedly struck the man multiple times, leaving him with redness to the face and a small bruise to the lower lip. According to the police, the women were arrested on 1 count each of battery. Zuluaga was taken to the Miami-Dade Police Department's Special Victims Bureau, while Perez was processed and transported to the Turner Guilford Night Correctional Center. Investigators said that Perez thought she was in a monogamous relationship with the man, whose name wasn't released. At the same time, Zuluaga lived with the victim and was pregnant with his child. It was unclear how they discovered the man's alleged infidelity. Perez, who was an officer with the Miami-Dade Police Department, was suspended with pay pending the outcome of the investigation. The department's director, Freddie Ramirez, issued a statement saying that although Perez was off duty, her behavior was unacceptable. Ramirez stated further that he was disappointed by the officer's actions. Number 6. David Hall Dixon. On April the 7th of 2021, 2 gunshot victims were driven by their friend to Prince George's Hospital Center in Cheverly, Maryland. According to police, the 2 victims, 38-year-old James Johnson and 32-year-old Dominique Williams, succumbed to wounds in their rear upper torso 2 days later. Pentagon Force Protection Agency officer David Hall Dixon claimed that Williams, Johnson, and 36-year-old Michael Thomas had attempted to break into cars in his condo parking lot in Tacoma Park. He told investigators that he engaged the trio and opened fire at them when they fled the scene. Surveillance video from the apartment complex showed Dixon, who was off duty at the time, firing into a vehicle as it drove away. He was arrested 2 days after the incident and charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of using a handgun, and reckless endangerment. He was also facing charges of second-degree murder and using a handgun in the commission of a felony in the assault against 36-year-old Michael Thomas, who police said was the driver of the vehicle Dixon shot up. Investigators later revealed that Dixon's overview of events was inconsistent with the facts in the case and that he had no lawful reason to fatally shoot Williams and Johnson. Tacoma Park Police Chief Antonio Duvall stated. Duvall added that his department had no intention of charging the surviving victim, Thomas, with any crimes. Dixon was booked into the Montgomery County Detention Center without bond and was eventually terminated from his job. As of the latest updates, Dixon pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of first-degree assault on September the 14th of 2023. For accepting a plea deal, the 42-year-old might face up to 30 years behind bars. Number 5. Justin Shields. Shortly before 1 a.m. on April the 14th of 2023, 25-year-old Justin Shields was pulled over by an Ohio State Highway Patrol trooper for speeding on Interstate 275. As the trooper approached the vehicle, Shields rolled down his driver's side window, handed the trooper his license, and then quickly showed the trooper his Cincinnati Police Department badge. The trooper then asked him how much he had to drink, to which Shields responded that he didn't. At the time, the vehicle Shields was driving had expired tags. When the trooper questioned him about it, he raised his voice saying, "I showed you my badge." The trooper then proceeded to give him field sobriety tests. Shields insisted several times throughout his interaction with the trooper that he had had nothing to drink, but he refused the breathalyzer test. After the field sobriety tests, he was arrested for operating a vehicle under the influence. Despite repeatedly insisting he hadn't consumed alcohol, he accidentally admitted that he did when questioned by the trooper one last time. On May the 17th, he pleaded guilty to an amended and lesser charge of physical control while under the influence. According to sentencing documents, Shields was ordered to serve 3 days in a driver's intervention program. 16 hours of community service and 3 years of probation. His license was also suspended for up to 1 year, though he'll be able to drive for his job, medical needs, attending his mandated driving program, and to get groceries on Sundays. Number 4. Colin Snyder. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department were called to the Northwest Valley neighborhood near Buffalo Drive and Regatta Drive at around 2 p.m. on May the 19th of 2022. A dispatcher received a report of a Nevada man who was allegedly impersonated an officer and pointed a gun at a woman. When officers arrived, they only found the woman. She then claimed that while she was driving, a man in a truck following behind her was driving in an angry, deranged and aggressive manner, revving loudly. The woman said she got scared, so she slammed on her brakes and got out of the vehicle to confront the driver. The man subsequently parked in the middle of the street and appeared to be wearing a police vest. He then reportedly pointed a gun at her, causing her to scream and run to a neighbor's house. The man was later identified as 32-year-old Colin Snyder, who was a local police officer and was off duty at the time. According to law enforcement, a warrant for his arrest was issued on June the 1st. Records show that Snyder turned himself in and appeared in court the following day. He claimed that the woman almost hit him head-on, so he turned his vehicle around to confront her. Snyder was booked into the Clark County Detention Center on 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon and 1 count of oppression under the color of law. While the investigation continued, he was suspended without pay. Number 3. Salvador Alejandro Sanchez. A federal jury awarded $17 million to the parents of a California man killed by an off-duty Los Angeles Police Department officer at a warehouse store in Corona. The ordeal occurred on the evening of June the 14th of 2019 inside the Costco on McKinley Street, where 32-year-old Kenneth French was shopping with his parents, Russell and Paula French. The off-duty officer, Salvador Alejandro Sanchez, was standing near a sausage sample table in the store when Kenneth suddenly shoved him from behind. Authorities said Sanchez was holding his toddler son in his arms when he was knocked to the ground. Reportedly, he then pulled his pistol, causing Russell to shout out, "Don't shoot! My son is sick!" Nevertheless, Sanchez opened fire, killing Kenneth and seriously wounding his parents. The family filed a civil suit against Sanchez, the LAPD, and the city of Los Angeles at the end of 2019, alleging battery, negligence, civil rights violations, and both intentional and negligent infliction of emotional distress. Russell and Paula said that their son had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Sanchez was later fired after the city's Civilian Board of Police Commissioners determined that Kenneth's conduct didn't present an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. On October the 27th of 2021, in the lawsuit filed against the city of LA, the federal jury concluded that Sanchez was acting within the scope of his employment, even though he was off duty at the time. That meant that the city might be liable for much of the rewarded sum. In August of 2022, the California Attorney General charged Sanchez with voluntary manslaughter and assault with a semi-automatic firearm. The 33-year-old is free on a $155,000 bond while awaiting his trial, which is set to begin sometime in late 2023. Today's topic was requested by Red Colt 79 and Neon Paints 48. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Drew Scott Romo. While being arrested on November the 14th of 2020, California man Drew Scott Romo, who was an officer at the Roseville Police Department, was told he was a disrespect to the law enforcement profession. On that evening, Romo was reportedly removed from a bar on Saddlebag Trail in Scottsdale, Arizona, after a night of partying with friends which had caused him to be overly intoxicated. He subsequently crossed the street and attempted to enter another bar, but was denied entry because of his inebriated state. Apparently, Romo became aggressive and confrontational, screaming at the bar's security personnel and passers-by. When he refused to leave, Scottsdale police were called to the scene. Responding officers explained to Romo that establishments were obligated by law to remove him because he was too intoxicated. When Romo was placed in handcuffs, he said he wanted to go home. He continued being belligerent, telling them he had a law enforcement ID, seemingly thinking he'd get away with his misconduct. One of the officers told him that he was a disgrace. Upon the lieutenant's arrival, Romo's demeanor changed as the volume of his voice toned down. Ultimately, he was arrested on charges of assault and disorderly conduct. Records indicated that Romo's employment with the Rosedale Police Department ended 4 days after his arrest. On March 23, 2021, Romo pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct. The assault charge was dismissed, and he was fined a total of $650. We have our video about when judges go wrong lined up for you, in case you feel like putting more of a dent into your belief in the justice system today. Number 1. Anthony Armbruster. On July the 14th of 2023, an off-duty Ohio police officer was found asleep inside his vehicle along Township Avenue in Cincinnati. St. Bernard police received a report about the man and were called to the location. Responding officers found the man, identified as 28-year-old Anthony Armbruster, slumped behind the wheel of the car. According to responding officers, the 28-year-old had a lingering odor. Armbruster, who was an Elmwood Place police officer, claimed that he wasn't going to work in the morning. Reportedly, he was given multiple sobriety tests, during one of which he lost balance. After failing the sobriety tests and refusing to take a breathalyzer, he was taken into custody for allegedly driving under the influence. After the arrest, Armbruster turned in his equipment and resigned, according to the Elmwood Place Police Department. During his arraignment, he pleaded not guilty, and his driver's license was suspended. Court records indicated that this wasn't Armbruster's first time being accused of a crime. In 2022, he was convicted of 2 counts of endangering the welfare of his children after they were found with bruises and abrasions on them. He was only sentenced to probation. Nearly 2 months after his DUI arrest, Armbruster was again arrested for being intoxicated and disorderly in Green Township. A criminal complaint stated that he had a heated argument with his mother and brother in a parking lot, during which he allegedly threw his brother to the ground. Armbruster was charged with disorderly conduct and was released the following day on his own recognizance. Number 7. Leticia Estacio. In November of 2019, former Rochester City Court Judge Leticia Estacio was sentenced to 180 days in jail for violating the terms of her probation. Estacio's legal troubles had started with a DWI in February of 2016, which resulted in a crash on Interstate 490 near Mount Read Boulevard in the state of New York. No one was hurt, but the front of her car was damaged and both tires on the driver's side were flat. She was sentenced to a 1-year conditional discharge, the terms of which involved no alcohol consumption and an ignition interlock device installed on her car. She violated the terms of her probation that same year by attempting to drive while intoxicated and was placed in an alcohol treatment program. Her highly publicized case would see Estacio attempt to circumvent the interlock on her car on multiple occasions, and there were several reports indicating that she continued abusing alcohol. The repeated violations of her probation conditions resulted in Estacio being sentenced to 60 days in jail in 2017. She was ultimately removed from her duties due to the gravity and impact of her behavior. In late October of 2019, Estacio again appeared in court, claiming that she'd intentionally stopped going to probation meetings so that she could get in front of a judge and argue that the sentence she was serving was illegal. Ontario County Court Judge Lisa Toole told Estacio that her actions reflected she did what she wanted whenever she wanted, which Toole stated she wouldn't tolerate as she handed her the 6-month sentence. Number 6. Teresa Brennan. In January of 2020, disgraced Livingston County Judge Teresa Brennan was sentenced to 6 months in jail, an additional 18 months of probation, and 200 hours of community service. Some of those in attendance clapped, with the courtroom echoing chants of "Power to the people," and one spectator reportedly shouting, "Welcome to your nightmare," following the announcement of the sentence. A few years prior, she'd been charged with perjury, tampering with evidence, and misconduct in office, all of which are felonies. Most of the legal turbulence surrounding Brennan arose from the murder trial of Jerome Kowalski. He'd been convicted of killing his brother Richard and his wife Brenda, who'd been found dead at their Osceola Township home in May of 2008. Brennan had had an affair with Michigan State Police investigator Sean Furlong, a lead witness for the prosecution. She failed to disclose the relationship, which was ultimately deemed gross misconduct. And in light of the scandal, Kowalski's conviction was vacated, prompting a retrial. During her consequent divorce case, Brennan committed perjury by lying about a cell phone that was a marital asset and tried to delete evidence from it. She was removed from the bench by the Michigan Supreme Court in June of 2019, and her license was later suspended. Brennan entered a plea agreement in which the other charges were dropped in favor of her pleading guilty to perjury. In court, Brennan spoke about the shame and remorse she'd felt throughout the legal proceedings and concluded with a plea for mercy. Perjury carried a maximum jail term of 15 years, but as per the agreement, her sentence was far lighter. Number 5. Tracy Hunter. Former Hamilton County Juvenile Court Judge Tracy Hunter had to be dragged out of the courtroom at her 2019 sentence execution hearing as she went completely limp when her 6-month jail sentence was pronounced. The legal matter dated back to her 2014 conviction for unlawful interest in a public contract. Hunter's brother Stephen was an employee at the juvenile court. In 2013, he'd hit an offender during an arrest and was in the process of getting fired. It was alleged that Hunter had passed confidential documents to Stephen in hopes that it would help him keep his position. The former Ohio judge considered the charges unrighteous and unlawful, arguing that she hadn't helped secure employment for her brother, who'd worked for the court for 7 years before she became a judge. Protesters claimed Hunter was being discriminated against because of her race and prominence as the first ever African American elected to Hamilton County's juvenile court. In spite of numerous appeals and efforts to have her conviction overturned, the sentence was upheld and Hunter was sent to jail. Number 4. Thomas J. Maloney. Throughout the years, multiple media outlets have named Thomas J. Maloney as the worst judge in history. He was brought down as part of Operation Greylord, a joint effort by multiple agencies including the FBI, the Criminal Investigation Division of the IRS, and the Internal Affairs Division of the Chicago Police Department. The operation targeted corruption in the judiciary system of Cook County, Illinois, a scandal in which Maloney became the most prominent figure. Maloney was a boxer in his youth before becoming a lawyer in the early 1950s. He established underworld connections and even secured payment to a judge for a murder acquittal. The Illinois Supreme Court named him a judge in 1977, and he quickly established a reputation as a man who could be bribed regardless of the case's gravity. The Chicago Tribune would describe him as the first and only Cook County judge to have rigged murder cases for cash. For several years, he'd managed to maintain a public image of unwavering toughness as a judge, while consistently receiving bribes and even treating defendants harshly if they didn't pay him. As Operation Greylord slowly gathered evidence against him, Maloney was indicted in 1991, much to the surprise of everyone in Cook County. Some of his most egregious rulings included the acquittal of hitman Lenny Chow and other members of the On Leong Mafia in a murder case dating back to 1981, just 4 years after he'd taken the bench. In exchange for a bribe of roughly $5,000, Maloney acquitted Owen Jones of felony murder for beating a man to death with a pipe during a burglary. He was instead sentenced to voluntary manslaughter, which cut his sentence down to 9 years instead of 20 for murder. Maloney was also on the verge of interfering in a case involving 2 members of the El Rucan street gang, accused of a double homicide, but eventually pulled out after discussing bribery terms with one of the gang's generals. In some cases, bailiff Lucius Robinson, who later testified against him, had acted as the bagman for Maloney and was later replaced by the judge's friend and fellow lawyer Robert McGee, who also cooperated with the authorities. For his crimes, Maloney served 12 years in prison from 1994 to 2007. Number 3. Mark Ciavarella and Mark Conahan. The Kids for Cash incident of 2008 is one of the most prominent and publicized scandals involving judges to have occurred in recent years. Mark Ciavarella and Mark Conahan were judges at the Luzerne County Court of Common Pleas in Pennsylvania. They were found guilty of accepting money in exchange for imposing unusually harsh adjudications on youths in order to increase the occupancy of for-profit juvenile detention centers. Conahan used his position to stop funding towards the county's public detention facility and instead sent juvenile defendants to for-profit facilities that had been newly built. In exchange for kickbacks from those who owned and operated the facilities, he agreed to generate at least $1.3 million in annual receivables, which would be supported by the taxpayers. What this basically meant was that he, like Ciavarella, was illegally paid to send as many defendants to the facilities as quickly as he could without arousing suspicion. Lawyers from Philadelphia's non-profit Juvenile Law Center, whom several juveniles had sought for legal advice, found that hundreds of cases had been tried without the defendants receiving proper counsel. Ciavarella was alleged to have received $2.6 million in kickbacks from the same detention facilities. In return, he sentenced children to extended stays for minimal offenses such as trespassing in a vacant building, marking a principal on MySpace, or shoplifting DVDs from a Walmart. Thousands of youths were affected by the two judges' actions. In 2010, Conahan pleaded guilty to 1 count of racketeering conspiracy and was sentenced to 17.5 years in a federal prison. The following year, Ciavarella went to trial and was given a sentence of 28 years in a federal prison. Number 2. Samuel Kent. From 2003 to 2007, case manager Kathy McBroom suffered repeated abuse at the hands of her boss, Samuel B. Kent, a Texas federal judge in the Galveston division. A former high school athlete described as a larger-than-life figure, Kent wielded immense power in the city, referring to himself as the Lion King or the Emperor of Galveston. He took advantage of his position to have his way with McBroom during her employment, believing she'd be too intimidated to report him. In one incident on March the 23rd of 2007, he called her to his chambers and asked for a hug. She reluctantly accepted after telling him it was inappropriate. When the mother of 3 got close to him, the judge pulled her bra and blouse up, then started touching her inappropriately. He forced her head towards his crotch while explicitly telling her, as she struggled, what he wanted to do to her. The sound of footsteps outside the room interrupted them, and McBroom left the chambers crying. While working for Kent, she'd experienced 15 to 20 incidents of harassment, at least 5 of which involved inappropriate touching. The incident in 2007 prompted her to launch a formal complaint against Kent and request immediate transfer. The following year, Kent was indicted in federal court on 3 counts of abusive contact. He thus became the first federal judge to be charged with federal crimes of such nature. Also joining the case against him was testimony from Kent's former secretary, Donna Wilkerson, whom he'd pressed against the door and forcefully kissed on the mouth on her 5th day on the job. Similar and worse inappropriate behavior towards her continued for 7 years. Another charge leveled against Kent was obstruction of justice for lying to investigators about what he'd put the 2 employees through. Under an agreement, the other charges were dropped and he was sentenced to 33 months in prison for obstruction. President Barack Obama accepted his resignation on June the 30th of 2009. Number 1. Lance Mason. Lance Timothy Mason served as a judge on the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas and from 2007 to 2008 as a member of the Ohio Senate. Mason and his wife, Aisha Nee Fraser, became separated in March of 2014. In August of that same year, he was arrested and charged for brutally beating her while he was driving, and their 2 daughters were in the back seat. According to the police report, Mason punched Fraser 20 times with his fist, repeatedly smashed her head against the center console, and relentlessly struck, bit, and threatened her life after she'd exited the car.
All right, calm down so you can 911, Shaker Police, emergency.
Yes, my husband just beat me and threw me out the car. He has my 2 daughters in the car.
Where you at?
Van Aken Boulevard.
Yeah.
And like Avalon. He just threw me out the car. Orange Saturn View 2008. I'm afraid he's going to hurt my daughters.
Is he with you now, or did he
No,
drive off?
He drove off.
Which way on Van Aken?
He went going down towards the police station. He probably hit Chagrin.
On the day of his arrest, the authorities seized a small arsenal from the judge's home. It included shotguns, handguns, and semi-automatic rifles, as well as smoke grenades, a sword, a bulletproof vest, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. On August the 13th, he pleaded guilty to domestic violence and attempted felonious assault. The Ohio Supreme Court suspended him from practicing law, and in mid-September, he submitted his resignation as a judge. He was ultimately sentenced to a prison term of 2 years and was released after 9 months. On November the 17th of 2018, in the driveway of a house owned by his sister, Mason once again attacked Fraser. He stabbed her repeatedly in front of their 2 children aged 8 and 11 and left her to die. Fraser eventually succumbed to her wounds. Responding officers arrived to the address in Shaker Heights, at which point Mason tried to flee in the victim's SUV. In doing so, he slammed into a police cruiser, injuring an officer. Body cam footage would then show him running back into the house, from where he was apprehended without incident. While sitting in handcuffs in front of the house, Mason was recorded saying, "I cannot believe I did this." He pled guilty to the murder and was sentenced to life in prison, with the chance of parole after 35 years, meaning he'd be in his late 80s if released. Thanks for watching. If you got pulled over for going 40 miles too fast and the officer offered you to pay him $100 cash to let it slide, would you pay them the money? Let us know in the comment section below.